Welcome to the Bobby O Show. This is Bob Opatsner. I think I have a very interesting show for you today. The year is now 2024, if you can believe that, which means that we are in the year of the election, and the next presidential election is in November. Our democracy is at risk. I think no one disputes that. And I thought the 2020 election would be a critical election. Hopefully, Trump would lose. I was supporting Biden and still support Biden, President Biden. But unfortunately, the way our world has gone with the January 6th debacle, insurrection led by former President Trump, and all the things that are happening since then, do nothing Congress, House of Representatives can't get anything on the floor to vote, let alone vote. And we now have a bill before the Senate's proposed that would take care of Israeli and Ukrainian and border issues that a lot of people are supporting, and we can't get anything done. So this election of 2024 is critical. And the most important thing is when they say we the people have to, as a grassroots level, get involved in this campaign to make sure that whoever your candidate is, in my opinion, it can't be Donald Trump. And we have with us today a friend of mine for years, a lawyer I've known for years, a basketball aficionado, Richard Kent. He has been very, very involved in the campaign for Nikki Haley. He was up in New Hampshire for several days and has been involved with her campaign for many, many months, he and his wife, Lisa Kent. And I thought it'd be a good idea today to have a discussion about what he observed, what's going on, what's happening in New Hampshire and the country in terms of the election of 2024. Richard Kent, welcome aboard.
Thanks, Bob. Good to see you.
Richard, tell me a little bit about why it is you got involved and when it was that you got involved in the Nikki Haley campaign. Tell me the progeny of that.
Sure. So last November of 2022, I went to the Stryker Center in Manhattan with my wife, and we saw George W. Bush and Bill Clinton speaking together. And it was okay. Nothing great. They didn't get any standing ovations. There were about 2,500 people there. And I saw a sign that said Nikki Haley would be there in 2 weeks. The Stryker Center is attached to a synagogue in New York City. My wife was uninterested in going, so I went by myself. And I was riveted to her talk for the, let's say, hour and 20 minutes. And she got a 2-minute standing ovation. Now, much of her talk was about Israel. She was the United Nations ambassador previous to that, and she wouldn't permit anybody to take hits on Israel. And to a large extent, that's what she spoke about. But I found her to be very rational, very charismatic. And I handed one of her associates a card. She had not yet announced for president. And what she did announce in January, I heard from the campaign in March, and they were interested in having me meet her because I had a particular campaign issue about student athlete rights. And I sat down with her in Madison, Connecticut in May of 23. And I was just totally enraptured with her. And since then, I've worked on her campaign. I've gone out on the campaign trail. I've made calls to New Hampshire. I'm about to make calls tonight, starting tonight, to South Carolina. And I just think she's a terrific candidate.
Richard, you mentioned you were talking to her initially about student athlete rights. You are involved in that professionally now. Is that not correct?
That's correct. And I didn't know it at the time, obviously, but she's on the board of trustees at Clemson University. And Clemson University has a tremendous vested interest in student athlete rights, in being on the very cutting edge of that because of their strong football program.
Actually, Duke is playing Clemson this weekend in basketball. The basketball team is not so bad either at Clemson, but it's the Southeastern Conference and the ACC and other conferences are very much involved in this issue. And so she happened to be interested itself, apparently, in the topic. Do you agree with me about the critical nature of the 2024 election in terms of the impact on the democracy of our country and the future of our country?
I'm going to give two answers. The first answer is I totally agree with you. The second answer is we've been around for a long time. We hear every 4 years that this is the most important election in our history. Bill Clinton said it. George H.W. Bush said it. Jerry Ford said it. But I do think this one does stand out.
I actually thought that in 2020, that was going to be critical because we had to stop Trump. And I supported Biden and Kamala Harris. And I anticipated that we'd get things under control in our country. And by under control, I mean in terms of we'd be back to a more democratic society without having someone talk about dictatorships and those kinds of things. And I assumed that Biden would be a one-term president. But fortunately for us, he's done a very good job. And unfortunately, it has gotten worse. I think we're in a worse situation now in 2024 because of January 6th, because of the Do Nothing Congress, because of their activities in prohibiting bills to come up. We keep seeing spending crises happening. And I think 2024, you're right. Every term seems like a very important one. But this one, I am concerned, for example, that if Trump were to win, who knows if he ever would leave, and whether people would stand up. Now, the last couple of days, Richard, you're seeing Tillis from North Carolina, for example, I think it's North Carolina, standing up and saying, "Wait a minute, we have this bill on the border," and he's a Republican that people are trying to support, and now Mitch McConnell, the minority leader in the Senate, is saying that, well, I'm supporting that bill, but Donald Trump doesn't like it because it's going to hurt his campaign. So I think all these kind of things tie in to make it, I think, even more critical. So if this is not the most important election in our history of the country, it's one of the top history elections. Is that part of why you've gotten involved in this election campaign?
I mean, we can say that in retrospect, but if I do it in real time, it's really because of what I saw in Nikki Haley. And I did think, obviously, we knew at the time that Donald Trump was going to try to run again. And I thought she would be a person who would be able to stop him. And listen, she's still in the campaign right now. And I give her a tremendous amount of credit. And I mean, even if you read the New York Times this morning or listen to CNN this morning, she's getting tremendous plaudits from CNN and the New York Times.
Richard, it was interesting. My wife and I were talking this morning. I am a Democrat, and I've given a lot of money to campaigns for Democrats. I did send a check to Liz Cheney for her election campaign when she lost a couple of years ago. And we were talking about the fact that maybe we ought to give some money. We're giving money to Biden, of course, but we may want to give a few dollars to Nikki Haley, only because what you just said, I think it's very important that Nikki Haley finally, and you and I will talk about that in a moment, is coming out taking fair, direct shots at Trump. I love when Haley's saying now, we all know that Trump is a misogynist, at least the way he acts in public, and some of the things he does even worse in private. But I think that it would be very good for our country to have her keep pressing him on issues. How do you view that in terms of her putting Trump in a rough spot, even if she can't get the nomination for the Republican Party?
You see, I think there's another issue involved. I think she's exposing his weaknesses, which basically could be a blueprint if she doesn't get the nomination for the Biden campaign. She's exposing his weaknesses with independents. She won 68. It's a staggering number. 68% of independents in New Hampshire.
I don't understand, and you and I have had this discussion offline. I don't understand why Republicans are not standing up to Trump in mass. And so, for example, I understand the concern of, oh, he's going to get a primary against me, whatever. Trump's been the biggest loser since 2020. And I don't understand why 25 Republican congressmen don't get up and say, you know what, Donald Trump, the heck with you. And even Nikki Haley's campaign, you and I have discussed this and argued this point. I think she should have been much harder months ago. You disagree with me, I believe.
I'm not going to say that I disagree with you, but we have to view it through the prism of her campaigning in a Republican primary. And at the time, the Iowa primary, which is a tremendously conservative state. Look, we already had a candidate who went after Trump, Chris Christie. And what did he have? 2.5% of the vote, and he had to get out. So I don't know that she would still be the last man / woman standing right now if she had done that from day one.
Well, Christie's different than she is, because I think Chris Christie has some serious issues outside of this campaign. I still think of the bridge, what do they call it, bridgescape, in which he was involved, or his actually all his top officials are involved in stopping the GW Bridge for a couple of days. I think he has his own issues, but I think that Nikki Haley or any of the candidates who wanted to win should have been going against Trump and not been afraid of Trump. I think she has been afraid of Trump, but the question really is not looking backwards, but going forward, and that is there time for her to get her message out to beat Donald Trump in the campaign? And I think one issue in that regard, Richard, is who comprises the Republican Party?
I don't know that the Republican Party, as we know it right now, it's certainly not the party of your father. And it is Donald Trump's, he's co-opted the Republican Party. But you got to remember, and I said it to you, 49% of the voters in this country are independents. So
what percent of the country
say that Donald Trump has a ceiling?
That's true. He's got, and you know, I hate to say this, but since a lot of his supporters are older white males, I don't know if he has the same kind of constituency in numbers that he had. For example, if he ran again today against Joe Biden, I think Trump got like 76 million votes. Of those 76 million votes, if the same turnout occurred, do you think he might get 50 million or less? He being Trump.
Well, I don't know what the absolute number is, but we both know that under our political system, the absolute number is irrelevant. The number is, and actually it's now devolved into, what are the numbers in Michigan, Wisconsin, Arizona, Georgia, and Pennsylvania, and Ohio?
There's about seven or eight counties in America are going to decide this election, and that is bizarre. Richard, let's switch the topic for a moment. I want to get back up into the campaign. Tell me, you were up there how many days right before and after the campaign, the primary?
We were up there for 3 days, and it's unbelievable. Once you get off the highway and you drive on that narrow road into Manchester, all of a sudden, all you see is TV trucks. All you see are campaign signs. And we stayed at a Residence Inn, which was Nikki Haley's host hotel. And that Residence Inn, I believe, would be $122 on a typical Sunday night. It was $548. And the Doubletree Hotel, which is really the largest hotel, about a block away, was going for $750 a night.
I guess you can't blame Joe Biden for that inflation of those prices, right?
Correct.
So, did you meet with Nikki Haley in South Carolina ever? Did you ever talk to her down there?
I've never spoken with her in South Carolina. I've been to her headquarters in South Carolina. When I've met with her, it's been in New Jersey, New York, Connecticut, and now I was just with her in New Hampshire. I had more quality time with her in New Jersey and in Connecticut than I had in any other place, because I mean she was like a whirling dervish. She was doing 6 to 8 campaign stops a day. But it's just fascinating to see the inside of it all.
I want to see a picture, Candy, and my director. I'll see a few of those pictures of Richard with Nikki Haley.
That's Nora O'Donnell from CBS News. And that's Nikki at she was talking to a little kid at a campaign stop at a pizza restaurant.
How was the pizza in New Hampshire?
Didn't taste it. I would never taste pizza away from New Haven, Connecticut.
And what's this one?
This was at the Bedford High School at 10:30 in the morning when Nikki Haley was going to be it's a polling place, outside the polling place between 10:30 and 11:30 speaking to voters. And interestingly, there was actually some Connecticut media up there as well.
I think I saw you on a station in Hartford, right?
Yeah, we don't talk about rival stations, do we?
No. Now let me ask you a question. When you were up in New Hampshire, did you have an assignment from the Haley campaign? What were you supposed to do when you got up there?
Yes, I was the most significant was to be at events that she was at, because they wanted as many people as possible to be at those events, to be wearing, Haley jackets and sweatshirts and hats and the like, and to ask probing questions if there was an opportunity to do that. So that was really the most important function.
And how many rallies did you go to? Did you go to several rallies up there?
I think I went to 6, including the 2 biggest that I went to were the night before. She had 2,500 people at a hotel in Salem, New Hampshire, a huge hotel. It was like an oasis out of nowhere. And I went the night of the primary, Tuesday night. She had an event. She actually came out after CNN, and I believe the AP had predicted that Trump would win the primary. She came out and she spoke with her 2 children for about 20 minutes.
I really enjoyed watching Dixville Notch in New Hampshire is traditionally the place where the first votes come out in New Hampshire for the primaries. And it was 12:01 a.m. They were doing the votes, and there were 6 people who voted. But in light of what's going on, and I've been following this election campaign very, very closely, as you know, and just to watch that democracy in action of 6 votes counting and the way these people felt about it, it was very moving. And I'm sure it was moving to you to be involved in the campaign as you were, and still involved in the campaign, was it not?
So I went to sleep at 11:30 that night. I woke up. I didn't check the news. I went down to the restaurant at the Residence Inn, and all of a sudden I'm with Marianne Williamson, who I didn't know at all, didn't even recognize her until she introduced herself. And I was wearing a Haley jacket, and she said, "Congrats on Dixville. You won 6-0. Did you know that?" So that's how I found out about it, from Marianne Williamson, who's run, I think, every presidential election since FDR probably. And there she was. She was just down in the restaurant grabbing coffee.
Speaking of the media, did you get involved at all in observing how the media was covering the primary? Any thoughts about that? Any comments about what you observed?
Yeah, it was fascinating. It really was. The 2 that I want to talk about are Fox streaming and CNN, because we got invited. My wife and I got invited to a restaurant called Chez Vachon, which is the most, and I emphasize most, famous political restaurant in Manchester. Every candidate since, I'm trying to think what I was told, I think since Jimmy Carter, other than Barack Obama, on both sides, has been there for a campaign stop. So we got invited there by the Haley campaign. We're positioned in a booth next to Dana Bash, who was on Inside Politics from 12 to 1 on CNN. Dana and I had a person in common from New Jersey. She's from New Jersey, so I started up a conversation with her. And then we were seated at a booth as she was interviewing Governor Sununu, the biggest Nikki Haley supporter in New Hampshire, and Nikki Haley, for almost an hour. And we're on air for the entire hour. And then Dana came over and sat with us because she was fascinated as to why we were Nikki Haley supporters, where it derived from. And she even mentioned it the next day, Wednesday, as we were driving back to Connecticut on the air.
Any other observations? Did you actually see anybody else from MSNBC or any of the stations?
Yeah, I was very impressed with John Berman, who's also on CNN. Really bright guy. I saw him do a couple of interviews, and I also observed him speaking off the record. I also saw a number of pollsters who I've seen on TV. One of them was Frank Luntz, I believe. And I was just observing what they were doing. And you're so close to people there in hotel lobbies and places like that that you can just hear all the inside scoop. Okay, so what does this county mean? What does it mean if Haley wins in Portsmouth? Portsmouth is a traditional, more liberal area. So just getting that scoop from people that are really in the inside and do this for their careers was just fascinating and enervating.
It was interesting when I was watching MSNBC on the polling issues, and you'd hear one of the announcers, the expert they had on polling, saying, well, Nikki Haley needs to do 60% of the votes from Concord because she's going to be losing votes over here. So when the votes came from Concord and she was like 57%, the announcer said, well, she's 3% under, and it's so interesting how they can pinpoint the needs and the voter turnout. Although I happen to be a non-believer in polls. I just, how you ask the question is so critical, and who gets asked and who's answered. I still believe that a lot of the people who formerly supported Trump don't want to say it out loud that they're against voting for Trump this time in 2024. I would love to know, if we could ever know, the number of people. That's why I asked the question I asked before, who supported Trump in 2016, 2020, who now are going to be voting against Trump. Thoughts?
I agree with you. And you hear, especially commentators on MSNBC and CNN, say that all the time, that you don't really get a good read on it because people are afraid on both sides to say that they're for Donald Trump, and they're also afraid, and for the life of me, I can't understand why the average citizen would be concerned about reprisals or something like that. But yeah, I don't think that polls are truly indicative of the true Donald Trump vote one way or the other.
The thing that worries me about this election is that people I know who are not the MAGAs, or you wouldn't think that they'd be the MAGAs, the Trump key supporters. But I talked to someone yesterday, a banker I know, really nice lady. And somehow we got discussing briefly the election. And I said, can you believe that people are supporting Trump, even though he says he wants to be a dictator? He says for one day, but it's going to be the entire term. And this lady said to me, well, he was kidding. He was just kidding. And I said, what do you mean he was just? I thought she was kidding me. He said, no, he was just kidding. He doesn't really mean it. And I have another friend of mine who's they're so worried about immigration and why isn't Biden stopping immigration? I said, well, Congress has the power to stop immigration. There's only so many things that can be done by executive order. In fact, the Supreme Court overturned an executive resolution that President Biden did, but it was involving COVID and people coming in across the border. But people have misperceptions, and I just don't understand how people can say, "Oh, Trump's only kidding." And for something, they used to say about Reagan, who was a Teflon man, nothing stuck. Anything that happens good in our country, Biden gets no support on. But anything bad happens, it's all his fault. Comments, Richard?
I mean, uncertain. I don't live in a world of absolutes, so I don't think he gets all the credit or all the demerits either. It's just it's a different world with Donald Trump being in the world, and once again, another reason why I supported Nikki Haley, why I continue to support Nikki Haley, why I think she's a tremendous candidate, and I'm still hopeful that there's a ray of sunshine in South Carolina.
Trump against Biden, who wins?
I gotta believe that unless there's a tremendous movement towards third-party candidates, towards RFK Jr., that Joe Biden wins that election 8 out of 10 times.
I've had people tell me that they don't like Trump. They're either Republicans or independents who don't like Trump, but they're going to sit out the election. I said, well, that means to me you're voting for Trump because Trump has his key supporters who are going to go out for him, but others will not get the support. In the last few minutes we have here, what are Nikki Haley's chances to get the nomination for the Republican Party?
I think she's got to perform 40% or above in South Carolina. And then the Super Tuesday, which is March the 5th, I think 14 of those states permit independent voters to vote in addition to Republicans. And I think she can make some serious hay there if she can get beyond South Carolina. Now, very importantly, and another thing that I learned when I was up there, I actually kind of knew it anecdotally beforehand, how important money is for these candidates. And Nikki Haley she's got a huge amount of money from what I've been told in the bank. She was extremely frugal. She didn't fly private. She stayed at Residence Inns. And she's also holding 14 fundraisers between now and the South Carolina primary, one really big one in New York City. So the money, the donors, I think she lost only one donor so far. The donors have to continue. And if the donors continue, and I think if she does 40% or better in South Carolina, it can bring her to Super Tuesday, where she could be successful.
What are the chances of her being successful, you think, in the end?
I can't handicap that. I'm not that sophisticated about it. I'm saying, let's put it this way. I'm willing to say there is a path.
It's a remote path. I happen to think, as I said earlier in the show, that if she had been stronger earlier, she might have done better in the campaign. Although you were correct when you say that if you have the base of people, they're never going to support her. The fact that she's a woman, I think, hurts her with some of her MAGA people. We have 1 minute left in the show today, Richard, and you've been very informative and interesting about your experience. If you were to do 2 or 3 things for Nikki Haley right now, if you ran her campaign, what would they be to try to get her the nomination?
I think she's going really hard against Donald Trump. I would have her go even harder against Donald Trump to emphasize how he's trying to bully the Republican donors, all donors to Nikki Haley, by saying they'll never be a part of the MAGA party. I would just continue to fundraise at a very high level. And I would make as many campaign stops in South Carolina, as much canvassing as possible to have people that don't know her, which is difficult to believe since she was a 2-term governor there, get to know her. Because when you get to know her, you'll see she's charismatic, and you'll see that she's a suburban mom that you would feel comfortable having pick up your kids from middle school and take them home for a play date.
Richard, as I said at the start of the show, I'm a Biden supporter, but I want to say to people, whoever you support, you got to get out and vote. When I used to run in campaigns, it was GOTV, get out the vote. And I think it's very important for those of us who are trying to fight for the support and the continuance of democracy. You got to get out and vote. And quite frankly, whoever you want to vote for is fine. Just don't vote for Trump as far as I'm concerned. And to sit out the election is not good. Richard, I really commend you, even though you're supporting a candidate that I don't support, the work you've done, the hours you spent, that you and your wife have spent. I tip my chapeau to you in that regard.
Well, I appreciate that.
This has been Bobo Potts and Richard Kapp on The Bobby O Show. See you next time.